It is Sunday, the 7th of May, 2017. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church, Montreal. I'm a little over an hour into my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And I think I'm going to wrap up the protest. Basically got a full hour's worth of video of the protest. It's basically my personal security cam that's running most of the time, and I'm doing a little monologue explaining what the protest is about. I could continue protesting, for another half hour or whatever, but I think I'm going to wrap it up. We've had a very good 1 hour's worth of protesting here. There are other things I can do with my time, and I think I'm going to do them. One of those things, by the way, is uploading the videos. I like to upload the videos as quickly as possible these days so that they're available. And I have some very good reasons for wanting to upload today's videos, the most recent segment, because there's some new information regarding the legal bullying, the threatened lawsuit against Reverend Gail Seavey by former UUA President, Reverend Dr. William Schulz, Bill Schulz, or Schultz, or maybe it's Schultz. Schultz sounds good to me. But anyhow, I spoke about that in the last segment of video, and for that reason, I'd like to get this video up sooner rather than later. I do see some people showing up somewhat belatedly here. The service started a little while ago, so they're showing up late. This happens quite frequently. Lots of Montreal Unitarians, aren't all that concerned about showing up for the service on time. There are quite a number of late arrivals. So anyway, getting back to things, essentially what it comes down to is just in the last week, it came to my attention that the Berry Street lecture that Reverend Gail Seavey had delivered at last year's General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, this is a lecture that's delivered to Unitarian Universalist ministers. It's not a lecture or essay that's delivered to the delegates, the plenary. It's not something that goes out to thousands of Unitarian Universalists. It's basically a lecture essay that is seen by a few hundred, I think, Unitarian Universalist ministers. But the essay is always published and posted to the internet. And I had seen the essay, when it was first published. And then I'd seen it, sometime later when there had been a statement made on it about Reverend Dr. William Schultz disagreeing with something that Reverend Gail Seavey said in it regarding him, which didn't reflect very well on him. So initially there was this statement where Reverend Dr. William Schultz countered what Reverend Gail Seavey said with his own version of the facts, or lack thereof, actually. And so there was this statement that was, added to the Berry Street lecture from William Schultz, essentially, from his perspective, countering what Reverend Gail Seavey said. But apparently this wasn't good enough for Reverend William Schultz, also known as Bill Schultz, who, besides being a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, is also a former president or executive officer of Amnesty International USA, and also a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, So we're talking about a very prominent Unitarian Universalist minister. We're also talking about someone who presents himself as a champion for human rights, which one would think include free speech. But here's what happened. Apparently it wasn't good enough for Reverend Schulz to be able to add his, disclaimer, as it were, to Reverend Gail Seavey's Berry Street lecture. His statement saying, well, I believe that I've been misrepresented by Reverend Gail Seavey. Now, that wasn't good enough. What happened is that Reverend William Schulz, at some point in time, threatened to sue Reverend Gail Seavey if she... I think he also threatened to sue the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association too, actually, because it's the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association that sponsors the Berry Street essays and also posts them to its website. So I believe he threatened to sue not just Reverend Gail Seavey herself, but also the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association if they did not remove what Reverend Gail Seavey said about him from the transcript of her Berry Street lecture. This is questionable behavior, to say the very least, on the part of someone who presents himself as being a great champion of human rights, which includes freedom of speech. In other words, if he thought Reverend Gail Seavey had misrepresented him, well, he had every right to counter that, but to hide it from public view, to force or persuade, shall we say, Reverend Gail Seavey and the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association to erase what Reverend Gail Seavey said from the written transcript of the Berry Street lecture that she delivered less than a year ago is, in my view, in violation of the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, which calls for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. How can anyone enter into a free and responsible search for the truth and meaning, or lack thereof, of what Reverend Gail Seavey said about Reverend Dr. William Schulz, however you want to pronounce it, in her Berry Street essay, if they can't even read it, if they don't even know what she said? I know what she said. I could tell you right now, but I'm not going to, because I want people to try and find out. I want people to realize, that it's not a good thing for information about Unitarian Universalist clergy misconduct matters to be memory hold. This is a case of memory holding. If you've read 1984, you know what I'm talking about. This is a case very much of what went on in the what's the word I'm looking for? Non-utopian? What's the word I'm looking for? Dystopic, yeah. The dystopic novel, 1984, written by George Orwell, includes this whole thing of the memory hole about how, historic documents were just, erased, obliterated. Now, it wasn't the whole Berry Street lecture that was erased, that was obliterated, that was sent to the memory hole, but it was a segment of it regarding the behavior of Reverend Dr. William Schulz, whatever. Bill, trying to pronounce it, Schulz. Yeah, that's the name, Schulz. Yeah, that sounds really good to me, Schulz. I'm having some fun here, obviously, with the pronunciation of Schulz. Schulz, yeah, it's pretty close. So anyhow, so guess what? Reverend Dr. William Schulz, I'm going to put that information out there. Not right away. I want people to look for it themselves. But you can sue me. You can come and sue me for reporting what Reverend Gail CV said about you in her Berry Street lecture. You can come and sue me and see what happens, you hypocritical piece of shit, Reverend Dr. William Schulz.